Let's intro this thing. Wow. Let's go. This is the G podcast where we focus on family, friendships, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. You heard? This is the G podcast. Let's go. I really appreciate y'all tuning in. These right here are not even official episodes, but I'm glad that y'all are at least tuning in, joining, documenting the journey. We call these a pilot before a pilot. I'm definitely working on a pilot episode where I have it just formatted a bit more, what I would say officially. That's what I would say, a bit more officially. But what I can tell you is we definitely working on that. It's going to be coming soon. Until then, and honestly, till after then, this will just be a way that I will continue to document different pieces of content. I'll have more official episodes related to those 5Fs. And I'll also just have episodes just also related to those 5Fs, but maybe in some different ways, just be formatted differently. Again, this you won't expect the same thing week to week. The one thing you can expect, though, is the CG. This is the G podcast. Wow. Today, you might say, all right, what's the point of this thing? That's what I want to talk about, the whole point of this. And I really want to just start by, I guess, from where something we discussed on the last joint on the It's a Pilot. All right. If you haven't seen that one, please make sure you go check it out. It's called Gotta Get Started. And it just documents how it all started. And even from that episode to here, so many elements come into play that really helped me get to this point. I really just want to talk about how we got here. I am an artist at heart. So that's number one. I've always had my hand in trying to make music. Then that grew into trying to be a photographer and take photos, especially as I was living in Amsterdam and had the opportunity to travel. I mean, I probably hit maybe 10 countries total, and I did all of that in a 2-year period. And before probably the age of 25, I had definitely never left the country. And let's see, I think been on a plane like a handful of times as far as like Kansas. Maybe I went to Cali once. It's like a lot happened for me when I did live in Amsterdam. I went to grad school, something I never thought I would do, but it all starts sort of, again, from the point where it was about investing in the art and in the passion to create and express like your vision. And whether that be through music or photography, I just always had this desire to do that. In present day, funny enough, when I first started creating my own art, podcast wasn't necessarily even a thing. And funny enough, I remember, hey man, shout out because, excuse me, I would listen to my step pop Pete. He would listen to AM radio all the time, and I'd be like, why is he just sitting there listening to people talk? I didn't quite get it. And so it's very, interesting to see how I perceive what was, AM radio, talk radio, just voices, versus now, that's basically all I consume. When I first started making music, the idea of being a podcast, it wasn't even a thing. There were no podcasts. And one of the things about me around that time frame when I first started trying to make music was that I was finishing up undergrad. I went to Winston-Salem State. And that was when I first really started to record myself, understand like, oh, I could maybe actually be good at this thing. And the one thing that always stood out from day one that I always had consistent feedback about was my voice. Man, you got a good voice. People wouldn't have much else to say good about the music, but they'll be at least like, got a good voice. That's typically how stuff go, man. Hey, man, you got to learn to pat yourself on the back, man. That's one of the keys to this thing. When I was making music, I also was entering the professional world. And, at that young of an age, I definitely just even going to college I applied to 3 schools, got into 1. So that was just like, thankfully, honestly, if I didn't have the friend group I had at the time in high school, I don't know what that would have ended up being, but ended up at Winston-Salem State, had a phenomenal experience, and would highly recommend not just, an HBCU, but, one like Winston-Salem State was a unique experience. It was small enough. It was just definitely a nice familial sort of community vibe on the campus. And I got what I needed out of that experience. When you start to look at like, okay, I'm early professional. At that time, you talking 2009 recession, right? And I'm a rebel. I'm like, man, I don't want to work in corporate America. I don't want to go somewhere where they'll make me dress a certain way, shave my beard, have to look a certain way. I didn't want any of that. So I just strayed away from it altogether. I think that was a mistake. But we'll talk about that in more detail down the line. So creatively, professionally, I'm trying to make music. I'm trying to have that freedom to be able to pursue that, to pursue that to the best of my ability at the time. Me and my boy Hill. Professionally, I didn't go for, the traditional. Money was never a motivating factor. Like, money is important because it's a tool, but I'm not incentivized to just make money. Like, I'm incentivized to get the money I need to use it as a tool, because I take money and use it to try to invest in the things that I feel are worth investing in, whether that be personal, future, financial investments. Like, money is a tool. It's not the goal. It's a tool. And so you got to use money, not just have a goal of getting money. But we have to talk about that later too. I went into the nonprofit realm, had the opportunity to, funny enough, work at after school centered. I worked at a nonprofit agency in Durham, and they had grants from the Department of Education. And they also had some grants from the state of North Carolina, 21st Century grants. and I was a site coordinator at Hillside High School. Shout out to all y'all that I met during that time period. But I had an opportunity to try to do something that I felt it filled a void that didn't exist, that existed when I was at that phase. And when I was in high school, I thought about like what would have maybe helped me get to that next level. And I didn't, it just wasn't as common for me. And so being able to go back, just talk to students, even, I mean, I was like 22 and I got an after school room full of students where you can't just tell these kids what to do. Like, you 22 to 18, they some of them bigger than you. Like, come on, man. It's a respect thing. And just to have the respect of those folks meant a lot to me. And they gave me opportunities just to help them. And we didn't even as so much focus on academics, but we just talked about things. And so I really started to develop a skill set in learning and development at that point professionally. And I continued to build on that. So that's just one foundation. But creatively, I was still making music, figuring out my craft, trying to figure out my voice, my sound. But that combination of having a voice while also being able to work with people, different types of people, and have common respect for everyone involved in the process is something that I've been able to excel at, for a long time. So when I look at my background professionally and creatively, that's one thing. And then when I look at my personal background, I'm very much a unicorn in several ways. What is this? I met my wife at a bar. All right. Didn't know her from a can of paint. And at the time when we met, I was living with an ex at the time. And so my relationship journey really is very simple, straightforward. I'm lying like a mug, man.
No.
It's not simple, straightforward, but it's like as follows. My first sort of real sort of high school relationship was when I was in probably 10th grade, and it lasted maybe all of 60 days, give or take, right? And so lasting all of 60 days is one thing. You learn from one thing. And so one thing about me as it relates to like me personally is that I really try not to make the same mistakes. And I have, issues that I've had to learn to cope and deal with that are triggering. Even with those issues, it's important to not let these things impact how you show up in relationships. That is so key. That's why I think a lot of us struggle with the idea of marriage, partners, etc. But me, I've always been like a serial monogamous. I had that relationship 10th grade, and then I went to the 11th grade. That relationship was maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 months, something like that. But then I got in a relationship that was like the high school sweetheart relationship. It was very much a 7-year-ish sort of on and off growing up, learning experience. And before I met my wife, I was definitely at a unique place, and again was staying with that ex. We had broken up. We were living together, and every person that I met at that time, I made a point to tell them I'm staying with my ex because I'm just open. Again, a superpower of mine. I don't play around with stuff like that. So, in being open, I met my wife at a bar, didn't know her from a can of paint. And one of the unique things about our relationship, there's quite a few unique things. But one of the unique things from my perspective is not just how we met, because when I met her, I didn't know her and I didn't like press her. I was leaving. I was at Solas in Raleigh, Solas. Can you leave it in the comments if you know what it is? I really don't remember, but we met, we exchanged words. I introduced myself like, hey, how you doing? You know, this wasn't like rocket science. You know what I'm saying? And I insisted that I take her out the next day. And so again, unique. And the one thing that I get to say that she does not get to say, the one thing that I get to say that she does not get to say is that I chose her and asked her to marry me. Okay. That's where the is interesting in a marriage dynamic, because in our dynamic, the reality is I can't take complete credit, but I created it because I asked for it. She didn't. Okay. If she doesn't, no, hold up, step back.
No.
If I don't ask for it, it doesn't happen. If I don't ask for it, it doesn't happen. Can't say it enough. For me, that was where my life became somewhat like I don't have a clear idea to very clear at that moment. Things became a lot clearer because I knew one thing. Above a career professionally, above a career creatively, I wanted her. Period. Period. And a lot of folks would not make that same decision at that time period. I was around 25, and I think one of the big, I would say, common thoughts at that time, especially at that age, is people prioritize everything outside of their partnership, however they define that. They make every excuse to not commit to that, but they'll commit to a career, even if the career makes them miserable.
It doesn't matter how you feel.
Man. it's unfortunate because sometimes, man, we set the parameters and then hit go and then be like, I don't understand why I'm so upset. It starts with you. That's the common denominator between those 5 F's. You are the common denominator. And so if you want to maximize any of those things, family, the thing about family, the most powerful thing about family, in my opinion, is there's 2 truths. One, family, you don't get to choose. It is what it is before you got here. And after you get here, you don't get to choose. That's beautiful. The other thing about family, which is uniquely beautiful, is that you do get to choose a partner. That is also beautiful and very powerful. And I think that is one of the that's one of the more undervalued things in our community and why we ultimately haven't done what we needed to do. As the generations progress, the families continue to fracture. The just idea or acceptance of people having a role, it's like everybody got a role to play. Everybody. People go to work every single day, but can't play a role in their relationship. That makes 0 sense. 0. Again, professional, personal, creative. People make sacrifices for what they want. That's what they do. So I know plenty of creatives who lack professional development and lack personal relationships because they gave it all to the craft, and more power to them. More power to them. There's no right or wrong. I also know people who gave everything to the professional in a way where they actually had creative passions, but sacrificed them. Had passions or feelings of wanting to build a family or have a serious relationship, whatever the case, but sacrificed it for their career. But me, I said, nah. The thing I want most is her. For me, that was one of the best decisions I made. And that's the first step to me getting to this point. But even at that point, again, I had already established I was working on my voice. I had already established I was working on my ability to speak in front of people, to people, in front of groups of people, working with all types of different backgrounds. All of that was a while ago. This is like 2012 when we met, right? So that's like the foundation for how I got to this point. And when you look at this art form of podcasting, take a sip. When you look at this art form of podcasting, it didn't exist in that 2012 timeframe. And if it did, it was brand new. Just like my relationship with my wife. That was a turning point. I don't know what was in the air or the water at that time frame, but man, it shifted. It shifted. Shifted. Without her support from that moment to now, I would not have the confidence and the ambition to do what I'm doing right now. She is literally the battery that keeps me going. Oh, man. Whew. I think that's enough, man. When we talk about what this is G. You heard? The G podcast. You ain't heard nothing like this. I'm using my superpower times 10. This just a little preview, a little introduction. I do understand that I'm quite a hermit crab at times, so I gotta reintroduce myself to y'all. And I'm gonna do that through these episodes, these pilots before the pilot. It's a pilot before the pilot. If you didn't see that first one, please make sure you check that out. It's a pilot before the pilot. Gotta get started. This one right here is the G Shit podcast. It's a pilot before the pilot. I don't know what I'm gonna call it next. I hope y'all like the new setup too. Hold up now. Wow. Hey, man. New setup is quite nice, I have to say myself. That's it. I think we good right there. Again, shout out to that first 50. For the next 50, man, I appreciate y'all too. We just getting started. This is the G podcast. And when you listen to the G podcast, the hope is that you have some type of insight or tool that you can take and then apply it to your own situation so that you can have a stronger impact on your family, your friendships, your finances, your freedom, and our future. This is the G podcast. That's what we talk about, and everything else. Now let's play the outro music. This the mother G podcast. Crazy episode.
Looks like you got on course there, G. I don't think you ever come back plain white. But it sounds like you made it just fine. Welcome home, Flyer.
Yeah, I like that one. Yeah. Canon's got 2935, about to cut off automatically. It's the G podcast where we focus on family, friends, finances, freedom, and our future, and everything else. This is the G podcast. Make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, leave your thoughts in the comments. Let's go. I think I did that nice at the very end right there. So that stopped recording automatically. Got it all snapped in and the 30 on the Canon.